So good evening. Thanks for coming to the Wells Group forecast again. This is the 15th year we've done this. I said these same words except for I said the 14th year last time. So John and I and 50 brokers that have hung in there with us are happy to have you here again tonight. We have a new herder of the cats. So I would like to recognize J.R. Spees publicly. J.R., if you'd stand up. J.R. is an old mortgage guy, for those of you who don't know, and did a lot of business in town, so we're happy to have him with us. And I'd like all the brokers and staff at the Wells Group to stand up and be recognized as well. These are the guys that invited you and really do what needs to be done here. So on my notes here, I have the word special underlined, and it has a little italics thing and that sort of stuff. So we have some special brokers. The forecast has become quite a production and a big thing to put together. So we've rallied the troops, and we've got some brokers that I would like to recognize individually that have really done the hard work to put this together. So Joe Bob McGuire, Chris Serwy, Andy Radcliffe, Sherry Exum Peterson, Rick Lorenz, and Chelsea. You guys are the best. Thanks for doing this for us. And this thing's sort of expensive. So we've asked some mortgage people and some bankers to help us out as well. And this group's been with us for a few years. So in no particular order, I'd like to recognize Caliber Home Loans. They are all in Seattle learning how to be smart, so they weren't able to be here tonight. We forgot to check the date with them. The Malone team, American Ag Credit, Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, Alpine Bank, the Bank of Colorado, and the First National Bank of Durango. Thank you guys so very much for being part of our deal. Okay, so we're techie, and you can pull out your little devices if they're turned off and they won't ring. You can get on the Wi-Fi here. You have to type in your email on the Fort Lewis site, and that's so that Dean Thomas and the Board of Trustees can email you and ask you for money, I guess. So you get on the site, and then you can go to www.wellsgroupdurango.com, get on our website, push on the 2015 forecast button, and you can follow along with what Bob and John are saying here if that's what you choose to do. And then that will be on the website also. Remember, it's copyrighted. If you really want to use that stuff for your business, you need to talk to Bob or John or me or somebody and do that copyright thing. So please remember that. Let's see what else is on my little list of things to do. Mark Snyder, Exposure Productions, Sam Rose, Nathan Morris, Alex Poland from Web Services. Those are the guys who've done all the website. The Community Concert Hall. Leanne has been with us for years and years and years. Thanks for all that you guys do. And thanks to Fort Lewis for allowing us to use this wonderful, wonderful, what do we call this? Venue. This is the venue. So for the last 30 years, I've been waking up every morning, going to work with a friend of mine by the name of John Wells. So without further ado, John's going to start this thing. Thank you.
Just the arrows. Huh? Just the arrows.
Well, I'll just share a story with you. It's a matter of time where my company figures how to replace me with technology, and they did it this year. So just look at your smart devices, your iPads, and you can ignore whatever I have to say tonight, because my staff always does every Wednesday. Let's start. We really have the meat of this when Bob will stand up here and give you a lot of information and data. Your brokers in the audience today are available to help you get back and access that through the forecast. It is on our website. If you need copies, they'll help you with that. If you need interpretation, they'll help you with that. But let's talk about what we looked at last year. Well, we made a prediction at the Wells Group that we see 1,351 homes sell in La Plata County last year. Well, we missed that. We missed that by, I think, about 109. We were bold. But the difficulty, and a lot of you in the construction industry here right now know this, it was difficult to create that inventory to meet the demands that the buying public had in 2014. That's the shortfall. It's not that it was a bad market, it was a great market. This is what happens to us when we don't have enough inventory. We also predicted we'd see 8% appreciation. Now, if I was one of the economists at Fort Lewis doing the economic forecast in January up here, I'd take all the credit. But what we do is we have a dartboard, and no, we don't really do that. But we did predict 8%. We do analyze the data. We feel that because demand was going to outstrip supply, we'd see appreciation of the median price home. And it was 7.92%, so we got lucky, or we got some good data there. Unemployment, it should be pretty simple. We said this last year. It seems simple in hindsight. But unemployment is really low. It's lower than the rest of the state for the most part. That's good. That's bad. That's bad because if you look at the Durango Herald, you'll notice how many ads are in there week after week after week looking for staff, people, professionals, service people, construction people to fill the void that we have. So let's look forward. We're looking towards tourism. Tourism is a feeder to the real estate market. Many, many times, anybody in our brokerage staff works with a buyer that first became enamored with Southwest Colorado because they visited here and revisited and revisited. And we really believe this year is on that upward trend. Strong growth last year. We believe double-digit growth again in 2015. We also feel there's a good trend that's happening, good trend for Southwest Colorado, and that is that public land visitations are becoming popular again. Not that they were never unpopular, but it's more on the forefront. If you look at marketing, you look at magazines and articles talking about national parks, national forests, the activities that people can reconnect with, it's very popular. We're right in the bullseye of this opportunity. Lodgers tax, great growth last year. And we expect great growth this year because we were also predicting the tourism, of course. Part of that growth last year was in rate. We had 2 new hotels basically that were open all year last year, Holiday and Homewood Suites. Those rates were higher than some of the hotel motel stock in Durango. And so that was part of it, but we did have more visitation. So the combination of the two saw strong growth in lodgers tax. By the way, these won't be open this year, but there are 3 properties that will be constructed. One's under construction right now, 160 just west of town, 2 by Mercury Payment Systems and the theater that will be constructed or begin construction soon. So you'll see over 200 new hotel rooms by 2016. That dynamic, we'll see what that does in regards to moving the dial with additional visitors, certainly with additional rate. Well, senior housing options. This housing, as you'll hear the mantra today, that we need more inventory, but this is certainly something that we're going to have to face. Anybody in this age range that's a baby boomer, which some of you are in that age group here today, have dealt with this probably with your parents. What are your parents doing now? What are they going to do in the next 5 years? Or what did they do if, in fact, sorry to say, they've already passed? You probably dealt with senior housing. And guess what? The older baby boomers are starting to think about what are their options in the next 10, 15 years. If you look at the city of Durango and La Plata County, Bayfield, Ignacio, there's not a lot of inventory for senior housing, be it assisted living, be it nursing home, be it simply senior housing that's identified with some services to assist that population. This will create opportunities for development and opportunities for job growth. In town Durango is always the leader in values. There's more demand for in-town Durango. Now let's think about it. 17, almost 18,000 people that live in the city of Durango. 53,000 people live in La Plata County. They all don't live in Ignacio and Bayfield. They live between Ignacio, Bayfield, and Durango and the west. So really, what we understand is a lot of services and jobs are in Durango, therefore the demand is here. But at the same time, look around and find some vacant ground. I look at some faces in the audience that have looked hard for the last 18 months to find parcels that can be developed to create housing, and to create housing that can be attainable by the employees and people that live and work in Durango, Colorado. Interest rates, this slide was done a couple weeks ago. Don't know if it's true today. I didn't look at the market. Those of you on your smart devices can tell me what's happening. But the world market is very interesting. The stock market's interesting. The Fed is interesting. Here we are in Durango, so let's not think about that too much. But we do expect interest rates will rise in the third and fourth quarter of this year for mortgages. Now, in context, and Bob will talk about this in a minute, 2006, the highest priced, we haven't reached 2006 median prices yet, by the way, in Durango. Interest rates in 2006 were close to 6%. 4% or just under 4% today. Look at the picture. You still have a lot of affordability and opportunity, no matter what the interest rate is, if it goes up 1/4, 0.5%. Oops. There we go. I didn't touch that button. There's the no button and the go button here. So what are we going to see increases in sales of? With visitors, we see people that get enamored. We see second homes, vacation homes. The difference of being, of course, a second home is a second home for that family. They're going to use it exclusively, and their primary home is somewhere else, probably in the Southwest. Vacation home is certainly something they put in the rental market. They might verbo it. They hire a property manager. They might be in a rental pool. We believe it will see growth in both of these categories. A lot of this inventory is between here and Durango Mountain Resort Purgatory. Glacier Club, for example. Development of single-family lots. The developed single-family lots. If you're platted and your improvements, your infrastructure is in, those lots should see strong activity this year because there's a very finite supply right now of those lots. So we'll see strong demand for those. We believe we'll see a lot more front range buyers. Now, the number one migratory area that people that come from somewhere else to La Plata County is the Front Range. The greater Denver area, Boulder area, is seeing median prices and have for over a year above their all-time record. They're seeing multiple offers on homes. Their inventory available for sale is very small. They're in a very severe supply-demand situation. So people are naming their prices. Some of those people are ready for a lifestyle change. We're going to see a higher percentage of those people choose Durango and other places, but we're on that map to make a lifestyle change and move here. Three Springs. Now, Three Springs has been an answer for a lot of attainable, valued homes, brand new homes, energy-efficient homes. Their sales have been very, very strong. But at the same time, the developer of Three Springs has to put in new infrastructure to $2,015. That's more expensive. The sticks and bricks to build that house in 2015 are more expensive, and that home is, in fact, more expensive. So the existing standing housing stock at Three Springs will see appreciation pulled up by the new inventory that's sold through 2015. Kind of a sad thing. What we see here is we expect, let me start over. There's always a strong demand for a recreational or lifestyle ranch. Some people call their 1 acre a ranch. Some people call 1,000 acres a ranch. But the reality is a true farm and ranch agricultural operation is hard work. And we see a lot less people that choose to work the land because, quite honestly, the amount of income you can make day in, day out for those 12, 14 hours days is substantially less than a job that you can secure in the marketplace. What will occur? Maybe we'll see some division of some of these properties. Maybe we'll see some price adjustments in these properties. Bob and I are going to disagree on a handful of things. That's good. It's a good relationship to have with Bob. Texas. The oil patch has seen a lot of changes. Everybody knows that. So we believe that the momentum, however, from the buyers that have looked at Southwest Colorado are continuing to come. Why? They aren't deciding because of the last 3 months, 6 months activity and economy in the oil patch. They've been considering this transition for years. And the ones that can afford to come to La Plata County can still afford to come to La Plata County. We really believe that we'll continue to see a strong percentage of our migrant purchasing, primary homes, second home, and vacation homes from Texas. Bob will disagree with me, but that's all right. This is a really big threat, commercial, industrial property. What happened is in the shrinking with the economy of the recession, we had virtually no construction of industrial, warehouse, like commercial property. As we've seen our economy rebound, we certainly have occupied the majority of that, and we are behind the curve in supplying this for the growing industries, and the industries that we see knocking on our door considering to relocate here. It's a big threat, a big opportunity at the same time if we can find a location to build this product. So, 2015, a little more modest prediction, 115 more units. One might say, well, how's that going to happen when we don't have a lot of developed lots to put those homes on? We only have a finite supply of contractors and subcontractors. Well, we're still bullish on this market. We feel that our construction industry and professionals are going to figure this out and meet the demand. Our lenders and bankers know that this is a time that we need to create inventory. It's a great time to invest in real estate. We're predicting, though, 7-8% appreciation, much like we did last year. If there's more demand and less supply, you might perceive that this number should be higher. But again, the median price home in La Plata County is already at a pretty high value. Even though we'll see that expand with 7-8% growth, to get into double digits may be limiting to a lot of buyers. So that's why our prediction is 7-8% this year. So when you analyze the population and the second home and vacation home buyers, it's our belief that we're going to see 550 new residential homes needed in La Plata County. So where are those coming from? You know, well, the demand's going to be ownership, going to be rentals, going to be second home, vacation home. Now there's an apartment project on 32nd Street, 50 units in the ground, another 40 planned, and then in Three Springs, 101 units, I believe, and some townhome product. Okay, there we have, let's say, 180 units. We still are aware, we're understanding of all the other infill projects that are going on now. That's great. You add all those up, and if they're all built and sold in 2015, we're still going to be 150, 200 units short. So where will these additional 370 units be? Bayfield. There's some developed lots still in Bayfield. The affordability of Bayfield is attractive to a good percentage of the population of La Plata County. Lifestyle is good there. The schools are great there. And the price point there is close to $100,000 less than a single-family residential home in Durango. Edgemont Highlands and the timbers at Edgemont Highlands. The rest of the developed lots in Edgemont are being absorbed quickly. The timbers at Edgemont Highlands has answered that call and added the inventory for additional single-family housing to continue the pace of Edgemont Highlands growth and supplying the demand for Durango. In town Durango, again, where? You'll see this year a lot of projects approved, a lot of projects started, but again, these aren't going to be substantially large projects. They're going to be projects where astute investors, developers, and builders have found a pocket of opportunity, and they're going to create a product that works for that site and add that to the inventory.
Throughout the West, there is a trend towards people moving back to the in-town neighborhoods. And the reason for that is many of these communities have spent a lot of money revitalizing their downtowns, but more importantly, it's just purely lifestyle. And the reason for the lifestyle, we talk about walkable neighborhoods and we talk about rideable neighborhoods, and that's what these in-town neighborhoods offer. In addition to that, for Durango, it's a whole bunch of amenities. It's areas like Horse Gulch for the mountain bike riding, the Animas River Trail, restaurants, schools, shopping, all of those things are just more convenient and easier in the from the in-town neighborhoods.
And without further ado, Bob Allen.
So I can't believe it's number 15. Been doing this for 15 years. And I want to thank John, Jim, JR, and the committee that was behind all this. How about a big round of applause for the Wells Group? Thanks, guys. And then there's a couple tech guys back here that I'm not sure I could survive without. And I may not survive all of this without. So let's go. What happened in 2014? John just talked about a little bit about supply and inventory. You're going to hear me talk about lack of inventory a lot tonight. And I happen to think that's one of the biggest parts of the market, biggest issues in the market. The supply of improved residential housing and units for sale and for rent is still very low. That's keeping the number of sales in check and driving rents higher. The demand has been strong. Population is strong, but household growth, you're going to hear me talk about this a little bit more tonight too. Household growth, where two people live in a house, and then one moves out, that creates two households. Still the same number of population, still the same number of people, but now you got two households. Household growth has been much stronger than population growth the last 7 or 8 years. New construction hasn't caught up to that. It's still historically low, so that growth in households is stronger than the pace of new residential unit construction. It results in an inadequate supply, and that's what we saw last year. We continue to see that right now. Year-over-year growth in residential sales transactions last year stagnated because we didn't have enough new construction and/or attainable housing at the right price point that people can afford. Trust me, if we had more houses for sale below $400,000, we'd have a lot more sales. Mortgage credit conditions had something to do with what went on last year. They were tight. And they started in January of 2014. They started to institute that thing called Dodd-Frank that's nebulous, and we're all supposed to understand what we really don't. And that thing started to challenge, but they started to ease it a little bit at the end of 2014, or at least talk about easing it into 2014, and institute that easing in the beginning of 2015. What do I think is going to happen in 2015? Fundamentally, that demand, population growth, household growth, and our labor market are all strong. The fundamentals are in place for strong demand in the real estate market. The inventory, supply of improved affordable residential units is still going to remain low. It's going to be very difficult for the construction industry to bring those units fast enough to provide supply as quickly as we need it. We need it now, not at the end of the year. So I think they will try. So that new construction is going to go up here in 2015. But I don't think we're going to see a significant improvement in number of transactions. It'll probably go up, but it won't be huge because it's going to be very difficult to provide enough supply and housing below $400,000. Those mortgage credit conditions will continue to ease. The housing market's way too important to the nation's economy. Those mortgage interest rates may start to rise, and that may impact the number of transactions we see. So what are those demand drivers? Population, household, and job growth. Population in La Plata County has been growing at about 1.4% since 2000. Last 13 years, 1.4%. That's healthy, that's good, that's strong population growth. The city has been a little bit slower. I got a little note to myself down here. Does that adequately account for demand from the second home market? Probably not, which means that that demand is probably a little stronger than what you see just from population growth. If you don't understand anything else that I talk about tonight, you want to understand that the number of housing units we built between 2000 and 2005 was growing at about 2.5%. Household growth was only at about 1.6%. So we overbuilt it for several years. So we had a surplus of housing. And that when we were going into the recession, we had a surplus, and that created that decline in value. Well, what's going on in the last, between 2005 and 2014, is we've actually seen the number of housing units, that growth has declined and continues to decline in the last 4 years. But household growth is much stronger. Housing unit growth is only 1.3% between 2005 and 2014, whereas household growth is 2% between 2005 and 2014. That's why you don't see enough supply of affordable, attainable housing, and that's why you see 2% vacancy rate in our apartment market. Our household growth exceeds the number of units we're building. We've also got a really strong labor market. Our unemployment rate's down around 3%, and our year-over-year,
I think in general, commercial activity was up last year, and I think the real estate agents can confirm that. But what we really struggled with was industrial space. We had manufacturers, construction companies, warehousing companies, and others, some recycling firms looking for space, and it was very hard to place any of that in the county. Very limited product available, and really seeing what's happening with offices versus what's happening with industrial space tells a lot about how important real estate is. If we had had more industrial product, more warehouse space available, we probably would have seen even more job growth in 2014 than we did.
And that's what I was going to say before I screwed up and hit the wrong button. But the job growth that we had in 2014 was about 4 or 5%. It was very strong. Had we had housing to provide housing below $400,000, I agree with Roger. Had we had light industrial office warehouse space to supply to new businesses, I agree with Roger. We would have had stronger job growth and we would have had more sales. We're going to skip Roger. What are the other factors? Tourism, air traffic, lower mortgage rates, and weakness in the energy patch. The major tourist attractions were all up here in the last year, 2013 to 2014. All 3 attractions were up in 2014. That doesn't happen very often. As you can see, over the long term, those tourists come. They're going to come back this summer, I guarantee it, and they may come back in a bigger way than they did in 2014 because of those low gas prices. This is an indication of what goes on in the tourism market. Here, lodgers tax locally is up very strong in 2014. Our retail sales tax in the city of Durango has been up in a healthy manner for the last 3 years. Those collections are near or above record levels. So that market's very strong. The passenger enplanements at the airport took off back here in 2005. And that was right around 2008 was when Frontier showed up. And our enplanements have just rocketed. And as you know, as everyone knows, we're talking about maybe a new terminal, maybe remodeling the existing terminal. It's time for that because we've got so much traffic out there, it's far more than that existing facility can deal with. Mortgage rates are really low, even if they went up 0.25%. Here, if the Fed raises rates, if they go up 0.25%, they'd still be right here. And our real estate market's held through that 0.25% rise. So I think we'll be all right, at least through 2015. The oil and gas industry. Most of you know that your price at the gas pump has gone down quite a bit in the last 6 months. Well, we live in the oil and gas, we live in the energy patch here in La Plata County. And it plays a big part in our local economy. The oil and gas tax accounts for 41% of total La Plata County real estate tax revenue in 2015. That's 2014 tax payable in 2015. That's up from 37% in 2014, but it's down significantly from the peak of 66% in 2007. As you're about to see, prices have gone down. That's going to have an impact. La Plata County, the government, depends on oil and gas revenue. They've got some tough decisions to make regarding how they're going to change their spending patterns and how their revenue is going to change because that revenue is going to go down. In La Plata County, the activity in the last 4 years in the oil and gas industry hasn't been anywhere near what it was in the prior 10 years or more. Back in 2008, we saw the price of natural gas over here on this y-axis plummet from about, I don't know what that is, $11 or more an MCF down to $2, $3 an MCF. And we also saw on this axis the drilling rig count plummet from 35 down to 15, 12. So we saw a lot of layoffs back in 2008. A lot of layoffs in the oil fields here locally in La Plata County. I don't know that we're going to see that same number of layoffs because of this recent decline, but it's going to have an impact. I just don't know how big it's going to be. One of the things I do know is there's 6,000 or more La Plata County residents that receive royalty payments from their mineral interests in La Plata County. Well, look what's happening to those payments over the last 3 months. They're down 45 to 50% in the last 2 months. So their checks, their royalty checks, have declined by 50%. That's a lot. That's going to have an impact. That's going to make some difference. So I started out by talking about inventory and supply, and that's what you're going to hear me talk about the most. Supply just isn't high enough. Those residential housing units available for sale and for rent, they're still near multi-year lows. The supply of unimproved vacant land, it remains high, but land sales are actually starting to uptick, and particularly in the most desirable locations in La Plata County.
Land market right now is pretty hot. As of today, we've had 36 land closings this year. That's definitely the busiest winter I've ever seen in 12 years of doing this. And if that pace continues, which I definitely expect it to, we should end the year around 240 land closings. That'll be up about 10% from what we saw in 2014, and 2014 was up about 9% from 2013. So the dirt's definitely moving if it's priced right.
And I agree. Land sales are up. Land sales are up. You look at the black compared to the yellow, land sales are up. Inventory is still pretty high. It tends to be the case when you've got a lot of vacant ground like La Plata County, that inventory tends to stay high. But the inventory is starting to fall, and the number of sales in the land market is starting to increase. So we had a little gremlin here in the computer this morning and had some issues. And one of those issues is right here, where we had to show the Great Recession showed that the supply of land back here during the Great Recession is literally off the charts. It doesn't exist because it's getting covered up. But that's what happened. Back in 2008, 2009, the availability of land through 2010, almost into early 2011, it skyrocketed. Wasn't selling very well. It's coming back down. And I picked a couple specifics. I picked land less than 1 acre and land greater than 35 acres, just to give you an idea, give you a sense of what's going on in the land market. The 35-acre tracts are starting to sell. They had a tough time here in 2012 and 2013, but that supply is coming down. So is the land less than 1 acre. That supply is coming down. If you look at the number of transactions, the lots under 1 acre went up in the last year. The lots 35 acres and more went up in the last year. Farm and ranch was kind of flat. But all of that is above where it was 2008, 9, 10. So the land market has really started to pick up in the last 2 or 3 years. It kind of makes sense when you think about it. There aren't always the house choices you want. So maybe it's time to buy a piece of ground, and maybe it's time to start building some houses. And maybe that's what we're going to see here in 2015. Days on market for the land has also fallen way down. So these guys are down below, at least down below a year, and that's a good sign. It's a good thing, that's a good sign that there's more demand for land. Let's look at the housing market in town, a month's supply of residential units. To get this supply, what we do is we take the average of the prior 6 months of monthly sales, divide it into the current listings, and we get months. So right now, January 2015, for single-family residential homes in town, there's only 4.3 months of supply. That's pretty darn low. That's not a lot. It's going to go up. It's going to go up seasonally. It always does. But 4.3 months is pretty low. Same thing with the condo market. Condo market's down at 5.6 months. These guys are hovering around this 6-month supply, which is considering market equilibrium. And that's happened for the last 3 or 4 years. So if you've been to this program 3 or 4 years ago, you heard me say the same thing for the last 3 or 4 years. We've got an inventory problem. We've got a supply problem. You do not have enough. If you look at the price distribution, I get this information from one of the Wells Group brokers, Rick Lorenz. You saw, and you'll see him at some point here in a video. But I look at it, we break it out by $100,000 increments and then $200,000 increments. But here's where the real power in the market is, between $200,000 and $400,000. So obviously, here's the number of homes sold in 2014, and here's the number of homes available in December of 2014. I'm going to tell you, it looks like that almost every year, but you could double this number, get to 400. You could double it in half, and you'd still just barely meet demand. So you could take this 2.5 times, add that much more supply to that housing market under $400,000, and you're still not meeting the demand. We need more. You get up between $400,000 and $600,000, and that supply and demand situation starts to level out, and then you get above $600,000, and it definitely levels out. Equilibrium in supply and demand. This gives you another way of looking at the monthly supply of homes for sale by price point. Between $100,000 and $200,000, there are not a lot of them, but there's only a 6-month supply, and that's been the case 2013 and 2014. Go back to 2012, there was a whole bunch more, almost a year supply. If you look at 200,000 to 400,000, this is where the real power in the market is. That supply is well below 6 months, well below equilibrium. So there's a lot of price pressure below $400,000. Supply is low, demand is high. The days on market has fallen. 180 days, 6 months is considered a market imbalance, right about here. Well, for the last 2 years, single-family residential in town, residential acreage outside of town have been below that equilibrium level, and now they're quite a bit below that equilibrium level. Demand is strong for those homes, for those properties, and there's price pressure. Most of the home sales in La Plata County happen below $600,000. In fact, 90% of them happened in 2014. So only 10% of all the sales that happen on an annual basis happen above $600,000. That's been the way it's been for the last 14 years. But we still like to talk about number of sales above $1 million. And it's been going up. It's gone up for the last 2 years. It's gone up from, I don't know what that is, 35, maybe to 65. Number of single-family homes above $1 million has climbed from, 18, 15, up to about 35 maybe. And still not quite where it was back in 2006 in the height of the subprime market crisis, or right before that height. But it seems like it's climbing, and I expect that to continue. Back to supply. It's the final one on supply, I promise. But what this shows you is how that supply bounces around. These bottoms are typically January, right now, where the lowest supply we're going to be seasonally every year. And then the highest supply, much more comes on the market, June, July, August, happens every year. It's going to jump 30%. It's the way it is. Always happens. What I like to point out right now, though, is that is January 2014. That's January 2015. That drop in supply is as little as it's been for 8-9 years. So it looks like that drop in supply is starting to level out. It looks like we're starting to hold our own with the supply, and maybe we'll start to see that rise. Been over that. I don't expect much to happen in terms of transaction. I don't think it's going to go screaming through the roof because you don't have that attainable supply. The number of transactions, these are sales. I've been tracking sales since 1986. I track them on a monthly basis. The first thing you see is it's a very cyclical, very seasonal issue here in La Plata County. It's the way it's always been. So these bottoms are February or January, and it starts to pick back up in March, goes back up. So back here, I just saw my February numbers, and that number is going to be south of 100, and it's going to be about 85 or 90, so it's going to be back down in here. No problems. That's what it always does. It always drops off. It's going to go back up. And this kind of shows you what I'm talking about. You get a peak in the number of sales May, June, July, August, September, and October. Once in a while that happens in December. I suspect that's tax-driven. I don't know exactly why that happens, but that's not uncommon. My number for February of this year, just got it yesterday, it's going to be a dead heat with February of last year. So our sales thus far for the first 2 months, they're up a little bit, 5%, which is what the total transactions were up for all of 2014. We were up about 5% in 2014 compared to 2013. Had a pretty steady climb since back in here 2009, 2010, when things were pretty bad. It wasn't a great scene. But we've been going up. I don't know, that's up maybe 50% from 2009. Maybe this is something below 1,000, and we're something north of 1,500 this year. So that's good. We've had some good, healthy growth in the number of transactions in the last 6 or 7 years. Dollar volume, sale volume varies month to month. You never really know where that's going to go. You can get a couple big sales in there, and it skews it up and down. For instance, here in February, maybe that happened in March, not sure when that closed, but that purgatory sale is going to be in there, and that's going to drive that number quite a bit higher. So it's going to be out. It's not going to have the same seasonality the number of transactions have. Realtors care about volume. I care about transactions. I want to see activity. Dollar volume was up a little bit last year, and just like transactions, it's been climbing back up since 2009. It was up 11%, 2013, 2014. Number of transactions by property type. What's selling? Well, single-family residential is up just a little bit. Again, it's that lack of supply down there below 400,000. If we had more homes below 400,000, I guarantee that number would be higher. Condos and townhomes are down a little bit. Condos and townhomes are down a little bit. Condos are down a little bit because of some of the difficulty in financing them and because of supply. The supply has been down, and builders have been reluctant to bring new supply of condos because of the liability issues they face with the state legislation. So here you go. This is what happened last year in those issues. Townhomes were up about 6%. Condos were down about 16%. Again, financing, supply, and new construction issues. They don't want to bring it. Single-family homes, well, they're flat. Vacant land was up quite a bit. Commercial was up a lot, but if we go back a slide here, what you see is it's not a big part of the market down here in purple. It's only about 3% of the total market. It's pretty small, but that kind of increase is pretty healthy. And I think we're going to continue to see some healthy increases in the number of commercial sales here in La Plata County. What happened to the median price in town? Median price in town went from about, I don't know, $365, $370, shot up to about $395. That's a strong rise. Number of transactions came down. Lack of supply. The median is just a statistical middle. So if you don't have a bunch of sales, you don't have a statistical set below $400,000, that median, and all those sales are above $400,000, that median's going up. That's just the way the statistic works. I'm not a big fan of median. That's why the national markets have turned to the Case-Shiller Index. It's a paired sale. Don't have enough sales in La Plata County for me to do that. I did it up to about 2008, but recently we just haven't had enough sale for me to make that calculation. I think that's going to continue. I think you're going to continue to see that median sale price rise. Condominiums, again, that number of sales dropped. Price went up a little bit, but there's some difficulties. There's some other issues in the condo market that's different than single-family market. It's different than the condo market. The townhome market. Townhomes have gone up. Townhome sale counts have gone up. Median price went up. So the townhome market's still pretty good if you could bring them, if you can build them. They'll still sell. The number of units sold in the city actually went down between 2013 and 2014. After a pretty serious rise between 2009 and 2013, it fell back in 2014. How about out in the rural county, Bayfield, Forest Lakes? Out in the rural county, sort of the same similar thing that happened in the city. But number of home sales went up. There's still people coming here that want to live out in the county. They may not want to live in the city, may want to live in rural Colorado or have their idea of a dream, and that's still happening. And that price went from about, I don't know, $330 up to $365, somewhere around there. That price jumped out in the county. Still, there's not enough housing out there. We need more, and I expect that to continue. I expect that rise in median price to continue. The Wells Group likes me to look at a specific subdivision or two and talk about what's going on for a typical house. So we looked at Durango West 2, which is on the north side of the road as you head west out of Durango. And the price out in Durango West 2 for a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath home rose 78% between 2000 and 2007. Fell fairly significantly between 2007 and 2012, fell 20%. And now recently it's come back, it's risen in the last 2 years, it's risen 9%. Town of Bayfield and Forest Lakes, they've seen an uptick, continue to see upticks in the number of sales. Why? It's an affordable place to go. Those prices are below $300,000, below $350,000 over there, and people are going over there. It's one of the solutions. The town of Bayfield, number of residential sales in the town of Bayfield are up, and the number of residential sales in Forest Lakes are up. Median price sort of stagnated. The median price stagnated in part because they didn't build enough, quite frankly. They didn't build enough in Bayfield where they could have. They only had like 13 building permits, if I'm correct. We'll get to that. But I think they only had about 13 building permits in each of the last 3 years. It's not enough. If they built some more, I think they would have sold some more. As you would expect, with the transactions up, dollar volumes up in Bayfield and Forest Lakes. So what's going on with the Forest Lakes? This typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500, 1,800 square foot home. Forest Lakes saw some significant increase in value between 2000 and 2007 or 8, about 81%. And it also saw a significant decrease in value between 2007 and 2012. Forest Lakes was in the thick of the foreclosures. And so Forest Lake value came down, and that decline is influenced by the number of foreclosures that they had in Forest Lakes. Forest Lakes, correct me if I'm wrong, but it might be the second biggest metro area in La Plata County. So that's why I pay attention to it. I think there's more units in Forest Lakes than there are in Bayfield. What's going on in the resort market? It's now purgatory, but DMR, I'm not sure which. I think some of the real estate will still be called the Durango Mountain Resort. Not exactly sure how that's going to go. But the thing to see is their activity increased 2013 and 2014. Number of transactions was up. Number of transactions of condos and townhomes was up. Number of transactions of vacant land was up. Number of transactions of single-family residential was up. So DMR saw a pretty healthy increase in all property types and sales of all property types this past year. As you would expect with that increase in transactions, the dollar volume went up as well. How about Tamaron and the Glacier Club? Their number of transactions total went down just a little bit. Their condominium transactions went down, but their single-family residential sales were up. Their townhomes were down a little bit, but their vacant land sales were up. So they're still hanging in where they were last year.
So the Regional Housing Alliance was created by Bayfield, Durango, Ignacio, and La Plata County to really help create workforce housing opportunities. We do down payment assistance, homebuyer education, and financial and credit counseling. So our monthly homebuyer classes are full every month. We have about 40 people who come through class. And who's coming to class? It's actually all kinds of people. It is first-time home buyers, but it's also young families who've been renting for a long time. It's folks who are moving, have had a house for a long time and are downsizing and just haven't been in the market in a while and just want to understand how it all works. So I think the folks who are thinking about home ownership right now are lots of different families and households who want to get in the game. When families start paying $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a month in rent, they want to get into that home ownership game. The biggest barriers that we always see with our families is a lack of a down payment because we're in such a high price market, or they're carrying too much consumer debt. So that's why when we counsel folks, we're really helping them with a plan to move towards home ownership. And for some folks, that's saving more money. For some folks, that's improving their credit. For some folks, that's just paying off some consumer debt that they've accumulated so they can get into the market here.
Pam Moore and Karen Iverson do a great job at the Regional Housing Alliance, trying to help out some of those folks that need a lot of extra help to get into housing. Our housing affordability is influenced by a number of things. Mortgage market credit conditions, the mortgage interest rates are still very low. Still plenty of mortgage credit available here locally. The lenders, our sponsors, are all willing to loan to a lot of folks. Those credit conditions have begun to ease for first-time buyers here in early 2015. FHA, the annual insurance premiums, have dropped at the beginning of 2015 from 1.3% down to 0.85%. Fannie and Freddie have slashed the minimum down payments from 5% to 3%. It's going to help. It's going to drive. It's going to have a positive impact on some sale transactions. I've developed my own housing affordability index. And basically, an index of 1 means that a family earning the median income takes 33% of that median income and puts it towards their monthly payment. They put 20% down on a house, and how does that work out for them? Is that affordable or not? Well, recently, it's been pretty affordable by my calculation. Between 2009 and 2010, it's been over 1. During that subprime peak, when we were giving money away, it became very unaffordable. Prices rose, anyone got a loan. But as Pam and Karen at the RHA pointed out to me, Bob, people can't come up with that 20% down. So this doesn't really apply to those folks. So I said, well, what happens to this affordability index if you change that to 3% down and they got to finance 97% of the purchase? Affordability goes way down. It becomes much more difficult for them to buy that house. And that's exactly what I tried to show here. Remember this 1.0, go back, 1.0 is my index. It's going to be equal to 100 on the national basis. We're about 1.1 right now here locally. Nationally, the affordability index is at about 1.7, 1.6. So we're a lot less affordable than housing on a national scale. Deeds of trust, number of deeds of trust issued by the local lenders. A lot of our sponsors here below, there's still plenty of money to be lent here in La Plata County. They'll all take a look at deals. 77% of single-family homes are purchased and they're financed. Only 23% of our single-family home purchases in La Plata County are cash purchases. And I say only 23% because on a national basis, that's about 40%. That average is about 40% nationwide, believe it or not. Just saw that in the last couple days. I was actually astounded that it was that high, but that's what it is. I did some analysis of all the loans made for housing purchase in La Plata County. And if you were to guess what that average was, what was that average down payment, it actually came out at 20%, the average of all the loans. So my index that I've created is supported at least that far. Our feeder markets. John talked a lot about Texas and what's going on in Texas. Texas has been strong. The Texas economy has been strong up until now. That's going to change a little bit with the changes in the energy patch. So California's ticked up a little bit. This back here in 1995 was right after the Loma Prieta earthquake and the Oakland fires. We had a pretty big influx from California. I like to say that we went from the left to the right. And with what's going on in Texas, maybe we'll shift back a little bit to the left. I don't know. The adjoining counties, Montezuma County and Archuleta County, and San Miguel, which is where Telluride is, the number of transactions in those three counties, they were all up stronger than La Plata County. They were all up more than 10%. In fact, San Miguel County was up, I don't know what it was, 22%. They had a very healthy uptick in the number of transactions in San Miguel County. So our surrounding Four Corners area has had a strong real estate market right along with La Plata County in the last year.
What we're looking at is an overall confidence level that is elevated, and I think that especially our associate members, the financial services industry, they feel a great confidence in the prospects for the building industry. It seems like we're back in business right now, and people can't find enough workers to support their demand.
I think what she's talking about there is confidence, and I think that's very important. The builders have got to have some confidence to come back in and start building some spec homes. Their profit margins are pretty thin, and so they're less apt to do that, but I think they're going to start doing that. Single-family residential construction in the whole county is still remarkably low. It's still slow. The city of Durango, the number of single-family permits issued 2014 was up quite a bit. Out in the county, it was flat. Bayfield, like I said, Bayfield's been flat for the last 3 years. Bayfield, you would think they could start building some more homes over there. I'd like to show people this, just to get a sense of what's gone on in the residential construction market over the last 30, 40 years. And if you look at what's happened here in the last 7 years, rural county builds, the lion's share of building permits in this county are issued out in the rural county, outside of the city of Durango. The city is about half that. So this number for the last 7 years, 8 years, it's been really slow. It's been way below the 38-year average. I started out by talking about supply and inventory. We're not building enough.
We had 4 years of a recession, a serious recession, where people were reluctant to build. Money was tight. Nobody knew where the economy was going. There's definitely an air of confidence. But the bottom line, though, is subs, suppliers, the builders we know are all busy. And then that probably started last year, and I see that continuing for at least the foreseeable future up, through a year and a half or so.
Multifamily building permits. This is one of those areas that's been specifically lacking. Need a whole bunch more. They're going to build, John mentioned 100 out in Three Springs. They're going to build 50 low-income housing units out on 32nd Street. That's not enough. They need more. We need more. We need twice that. Easy. If you look at the construction market in the city of Durango, what's happened to the number of residential units permitted since 2009, it's been substantially below what it was for the 8 years prior. Starting to pick up a little bit. We're starting to see some increase in that construction activity. I think that's going to increase. I think we're going to see that continue into 2015. Look at this number countywide. This is the number of residential units produced in Ignacio, Bayfield, Durango, and the rural county, everywhere. This number is pretty low compared to where it was. Yeah, we overbuilt it. 2000, 2005, I showed you in the very beginning. Number of housing units that we built, stronger than household growth. That is flipped. We had a surplus, now we have a deficit. And this shows that. The blue is the number of residential units permitted on an annual basis in La Plata County, everywhere. It's Bayfield, City of Durango, Ignacio, rural county. It's the total. The red is household growth. So as I showed you early on, household growth was below residential unit production back prior to 2007, back prior to the Great Recession, which quite frankly is one of the reasons we went into the Great Recession. We had a surplus, we had too much. Well, here since about 2008, in the last 7, 8 years, household growth, as shown by the state demographer, those red bars, has been substantially higher than permit growth in construction. So what's the result? Low vacancy rates in the apartment market and low supply in the home market. We don't have enough.
For builders building specs, I think there are definitely some opportunities out there because of the lack of inventory, but they just have to be really careful with their price point. Profit margins are really low right now because of increasing labor costs and materials as well. And so they just have to be really careful. If they don't hit the nail on the head and they end up sitting on that home for 6 months or more, it could easily eat up all their profit and put them in a bad position. So there are great opportunities out there for spec builders, but they just have to be really smart and careful about it.
So we talked about inventory. This is really one of the crux of the biscuits right here. You look at our apartment vacancy rate, last 4 or 5 quarters, 1, 1.2, 2.7. I think some in this room would argue that it's less than 2% right now. It's very hard to find a place to live. And especially if you want to bring a new business into town, think about it. You want to bring someone into town that's got 20 or 30 employees, where are they going to live? How is that going to happen? I don't get it. I don't understand how it's going to work. Commercial construction's been flat for the last 2 years. I tell people this every year. If you went back into the 80s, pre the S&L crisis, the number of permits for commercial, it was north of 100. It was a big commercial boom, and so we saw that bust in the S&L crisis in the late 80s. We haven't seen that local bust in the commercial market, primarily because we haven't overbuilt it. I think you're going to start to see an uptick in the commercial construction here locally. I think it's going to start to happen right now in 2015. Construction industry is slowly coming back. These guys have had a rough ride for several years, but it's starting to come back, starting to increase, and I think it's going to increase here in 2015. So what do I expect? Long term, maybe not in the next year or two, but long term, fundamental growth, population growth, household growth, and labor market. Those ingredients, most important ingredients for real estate, they're there, it continues to happen. Short term, construction industry continues to recover. Those building starts going to start to satisfy supply constraints. I don't think it's fast enough. Therefore, I think prices are going to continue to rise. Tourism, they keep coming. They've been coming forever, and they're going to keep coming. We're going to see a steady increase, maybe even a stronger increase because of low fuel prices. They come every year. The one big wild card is the drought. You have a fire, as we experienced back in 2002, that'll stop. They won't come. Depends on how bad that fire is, but that's what happened back in 2002. It stopped. Falling oil and natural gas prices are going to have a negative impact on the Four Corners energy industry. It's happening right now. It's already happening. It's It's going to have a negative impact on local royalty checks, as I showed you early on, and it's going to have a negative impact on future county tax revenue. Our county administration, our county commissioners have some very tough choices ahead of them with the falling revenue they're going to see 2 years from now.
15 years ago, a number of Wells Group brokers were asked to answer the following question posed by Joe Bob McGuire. If I gave you $100,000 cash and asked you to invest it in real estate in La Plata County, where would you put it?
I would probably buy 2 properties actually, using about $50,000 as a down payment for each one. And I would purchase something on the more affordable side, probably a townhome in Durango. Also the single family or townhome market in town Bayfield is great. The reason why is because there's an affordable purchase price, low maintenance costs and carrying costs, and the rental market right now is so strong that you can almost command what you'd be getting for an in-town single-family home in Durango, but your purchase price would be significantly lower. So I think that would be a great investment personally.
I'm a big fan of diversification, so I would take that money and diversify it. I like getting monthly rental income, so I think I'd try to buy a house where it makes sense to do that. With the price of rent compared to the current prices in Durango, can't really make those numbers work, but you can in Bayfield. So I'd look to put probably half of that money in Bayfield, and I'd look to put the other half in land with water rights. With the drought that we've got in the Rocky Mountains right now, there's definitely a strong demand for land with irrigation water, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. So I'd definitely make sure I could pick up some land with water rights.
I think I would look at Bayfield or Forest Lakes because of the idea that you can get more bang for your buck. Looking at median prices in town Durango and comparing them with Forest Lakes and Bayfield, you're talking savings of up to $100,000.
My recommendation would be the Grandview and Three Springs area, primarily because the city, at least in town Durango, the heart of Durango is pretty capped out on growth in terms of where you can really expand. Three Springs and Grandview is an area that's got a lot of potential in terms of the bridge is now being connected into Three Springs, and that whole corridor there, they're getting ready to put in retail space, and there's a lot of potential for development, and there will be a lot of development there in the future. So my personal feeling is that's a great place to put your money because the growth in that area is going to continue for years and years.
I think the best investment in all of real estate in La Plata County is an in-town neighborhood. And the reason for that is there's very little inventory, so the values are probably going to continue to increase. And again, that lifestyle is what people are looking for.
I did some investigating and found a very interesting fact. In-town Bayfield homes generate more rent per $100,000 of purchase price than Durango in-town homes do. $100,000 of purchase price would generate $70 per month more in Bayfield. $200,000, $140,000, $300,000, well, you can do the math. That's a 14.8% advantage for the Bayfield rental property. I know what I'm doing with my $100,000. If I can just get Joe Bob to give me his $100,000 to invest.
That's the end of it. I thank the Mark Snyder and Exposure Productions for the video. The boys behind the screen are Sam, Nathan, and Alex. Without them, this wouldn't have come off quite as smoothly. I really want to thank a lot of the local businesses and the government folks that help me out personally. Every year, a lot of the data I collect, I know I call them, I email them, I hassle them to try to get that information here at the beginning of the year so I can put it into this presentation. I really appreciate their help. And if you got any questions, come on down, and John and I and Jim will be here. And thanks to these guys for putting this on.
Well, there you go, and there's number 15. So we would like to thank all these groups again, but most of all, we'd like to thank all you guys for taking time to come listen to this and have interest in the real estate market and what's going on in Durango. So thank you so much to everybody. Enjoy your evening.